Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you've felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 160. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in the country of Canada, we have a very, very, very special guest, Will Rossy. Will, how are you?
Hey, everyone. Hey, Joe. Thank you for having me, man. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Very happy to be here.
This episode has been something I've been looking forward to for a while. Ever since we first got connected, I've admired the way that you've gone about creating life with intention. And you have so much wisdom through the work that you're doing that I'm just so pumped to tap into. Before we go there, I am curious to hear why you go by the name Sprouht on social media and what that means to you. So we'll start there.
That's a good first question. Yeah. Well, I'll answer it in two ways. I'll tell you what the meaning of Sprouht is, and then I'll also tell you why I don't use my own name on social media. It's apparent though. It is still apparent if you look at my Instagram. But yeah, you can go two ways when you start a social media brand. You can pick your own name and make it a personal brand, or you can pick another name that's not your specific name, and you can create a company. They can both be companies, obviously, but the vision I have for Sprouht from the beginning was that I didn't want it to be about me. I feel it still is, but in a long-term vision, decades in the future, I would like for this to outlive me. The movement I'm creating, I would like for that to outlive just me. And I would like for people to appreciate the message without having to think about me necessarily. So that's like a forward thinking vision that I have. Now, what Sprouht means, so we can get into this, of course. I'll give you the juice that everybody admires flowers, right? When you think of, just off the top of my head, go to Japan. People travel all over the world to see the cherry blossoms. We take photos, we admire them, they're beautiful. Every flower was once a seed, but not every seed becomes a flower. So in order for that seed to evolve, you need to give it water, sunlight, food, other stuff. I don't know. I don't know this stuff too well, but you need to take care of it. And you can't just give it water once. You can't give it food once. You can't give it sunlight for one day. It needs to consistently be taken care of in order for it to start growing. And not all seeds receive that treatment. Some do, some don't. And the ones that do, eventually they start growing. And the first step that happens when they start to grow is they sprout. And so that's the meaning, not applied to flowers, but applied to people, where I want to create a brand that gives people the foundations for their own success. So it's not life coaching. We're not giving you a one size fits all type of method. It's more, there are frameworks to understanding who you are and what you want that everyone can learn. And you can use those to then start growing. But if you don't have the foundation, change will not happen. That's a little bit of the details there.
Yeah, I ask similar questions on all of these episodes, and I can already tell we're going to go off the rails in such a good way. So I'm not sure if you know this, but I have a tattoo of a sprout on my forearm.
Oh, nice.
And
No, I didn't know that.
yeah, so I love the imagery, and for me, there's a quote that goes with it, and so it's a Christine Kane quote, and she said, "Sometimes when you're in a dark place, it feels like you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. And I love that because, of course, it's beautiful and we can all find strength through our struggle and in those dark places. But to your point, not every seed sprouts, right? And it needs certain conditions in order to sprout. One of the reasons why on this podcast and in everything I do, there's a lot of repetition in the questions I ask and the conversations that are had is because I think seeds, like a lot of things in life, need time. And it would be ridiculous for you or I, we're not botanists, like you had said, but it would be ridiculous for you or I to go outside today, plant a seed, and then walk outside tomorrow and be frustrated that it hasn't fully blossomed, right? But I think a lot of times in life with ideas and concepts that we try to ingrain within ourselves, we get frustrated when we tell ourselves, I'll change tomorrow or I'll be different because I'll make this one decision and it doesn't happen. But just like those seeds in the ground, the seeds of change and thought, they need time and nurturing in our own minds. And sometimes that requires that repetition and patience. So I wanted to throw that out there. And if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them as well.
I would argue that not sometimes, but all times, instant gratification is product of the world we live in. I think right now, right? Like, I don't think either of us are old enough to like say back in my day, blah blah blah. But we're all kind of pressured to succeed right away in everything we do because of social media. So for everything that you and I do is measured right away. If I make a post and it doesn't get X number of likes or number of views, that tells me instantly that it's not good. Let's say that's the idea it gives me. So we keep searching for things that are immediately great, and we keep measuring ourselves by those immediate reactions. But everyone who's older than us, all those books, podcasts, um, anything, any article from people older than us and wiser than us, they all say the same thing, which is that it's exactly what you said. Change takes time, and nothing great ever happened overnight, right? It all takes time. But it's interesting because everybody can give themselves a head start or a strong start if they build the right foundations. Yeah, there's two things. One, we want instant gratification, and two, we're not taught how to think for ourselves, and we're just it's kind of like a cycle. I feel everyone is stuck in this cycle of social media and comparison. That's even if you're not even creating, just in life, feeling like I'm not getting ahead, like it's too late for me, like I can't make a change. And then you have people on social media who have the same problems, but even more of I'm not getting the likes, I'm not getting the followers, I'm not getting this. And it makes people give up, I think, a lot sooner than they're supposed to, because there are places out there in front of our faces. And by that, I mean our social media platforms that instantly tell us whether we're good or not, which is not how life works.
That's so well said. And I'll tie this back to Sprought because I think what you're doing is amazing. And then I also want to hear about Will behind Sprought. But there's a Greek proverb, I believe that it's a Greek proverb that goes, a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. And it's great because obviously it has the imagery of planting something and sprouting, et cetera. But that is essentially what it sounds like you're doing. You're planting this thing that will continue to grow and give shade and value long after you're gone, which is so admirable. But let's rewind a little bit. Where did Sprought begin and what was life like for you before Sprought was a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just to your point where I'm Lebanese, and my great grandfather in 1899 took a boat. He had, I think, he had 8 kids at the time in Lebanon. His wife was left them all there. He took a boat over to Canada to start a new life for them, to start trying to make money so he could bring them all over. And if you think about it, I don't know what the logic was back then. I mean, what his logic was. It's well over 100 years ago, but he's not going to be able to see all the benefits that he's created for his family. He may have he had the foresight, obviously, of knowing that I'm giving them a better life, but he sacrificed his own well-being, his own life, and essentially to give others ahead of him a better life. And I'm not saying that I'm comparable to that because I'm still enjoying the fruits of my labor right now. So I don't even know what it's going to look like in the future. But I feel a lot of people don't have that attitude. Like that's a very selfless attitude. I think of any immigrant parent that changed their whole upbringing and uprooted their life. They give their kids a better version of the world. That's sacrificing the body for the other people for future generations. I don't know if people these days have that in them. At least for the most part, we're quite entitled and selfish in our own ways. But that's another situation. I'm not really mad at the world, but this is a realization I've had. But yeah, back to your question. I uh, I think I've had a good upbringing. I don't know how far back we want to go, but I've had a very good upbringing, very good family life. My parents raised me with a lot of love. They told me I could do anything in life. I could be anything I wanted to be in life. And I had a really, really good upbringing, good friends, good parents. Like live in Canada. I'm very grateful. I'm ethnic, so I'm Lebanese, so I have that spice in my life. Things are exciting for me. And yeah, things kind of I don't want to say spiral. Like I don't want to paint my life in any capacity as ever being really bad objectively. There's a lot of people who have a lot worse going on than I do. But my worst moments, let's say, was when I went into university. I had just come off a bad breakup. I'd been manipulated by my girlfriend, cheated on by my girlfriend at the time, falling out with my two best friends. So from my own standards, life wasn't very good. And I was very lonely. I didn't really know what I wanted in life. I had an idea. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Role models in my life at the time had been, or still to this day, had been very entrepreneurial. And I just didn't know what that looked like, but I had an idea and I wasn't in a good place. So when I got into university, I went into finance as my major. So I thought that, I didn't know anything. So I said, if I go into finance, I'll learn everything about business. So I can learn a little accounting, a little human resources, a little whatever, operations, this and that. I can come out of school as if I was ready to start a business. And what I didn't realize was that finance is basically at least in my school, I don't know what it's like everywhere else, but finance is a fast track to be a consultant, an investment banker, any of those six-figure, high-paying jobs that are, lauded. The most respectable, prestigious jobs you can get out of school in the business world. And again, like I said, it's important that I mentioned it before. I want to say it again. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what that vision was. I didn't have a clear understanding of who I was and what I wanted out of life. So I let other people tell me what I wanted. If you don't know what your dreams are, other people will decide your dreams for you. And I was susceptible to that, even despite having a good childhood and good upbringing, strong values. And so I ended up working at a bank for over a year. I basically convinced myself that that was the right thing to do. All my friends would do it. My teachers would give me better grades if I went to their office after hours and told them that I was working at a bank. Yeah, that's bad. That's terrible in hindsight. I was like, can't believe that actually happened. Uh, I would get emails twice a week about networking opportunities for investment banking and consulting, thinking that my school was doing us a favor. Like, wow, they're really setting it up for us. But you don't realize that schools have deals with investment banks and other companies that they give them the exposure so their students can end up working at those companies. And you don't realize that even though you think school is the right path, and I'm not dismissing it, but even though you think school is the right path, there's a lot of really interesting parts of it that I wish I would have known about at the time. And so, yeah, I worked in a bank for a year, hated it, hated every second of it. Every second of every day, I wondered why I did this. And I realized around me, I had kind of nobody else who shared the same ambitions in life as I did. I worked in this bank alone. Well, there were other people there, but when I worked in this bank, I felt like I was alone because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but there was nobody around me who shared the same ambition. They wanted to get in earlier than their boss, leave later than their boss, even if they didn't have anything to do. They would just sit there, play mini clip, just like wait till the boss left so they could leave. And it's crazy, yeah. And I didn't want to be that way. So I got a job offer after a year full time for upon graduation, and the job offer was a 6 figure contract. So that's when I had to make a big decision. I have two options right now. I know I hate this job, but every sign points to the most respectable decision being to take it, even if that's means sacrificing my own happiness. So I can either say yes to this job at 21, tell myself it's okay to trade your happiness for comfort and safety and security, or I can go the other way. And I have no idea what I want to do, but I will promise myself that whatever I do I will be more passionate about that than this banking job. And it was pretty easy for me to say no because, and I'm thinking about this in hindsight, I had started journaling 8 months before that. And that journaling, that self reflection ended up allowing me to get to know myself a lot better than I did when I first started out at the bank. And so, yeah, just to kind of tie things in, because I've been tied for forever. But the way Sprout started, Sprout was the business I chose to start because it was the biggest problem I have with the world. Why do people who have the choice, I'm talking about people with the choice, not people who need to work and make money to survive, not those people, but people have the choice to do what they want in life. Why do you choose to work in a job and live a life that you don't love, knowing that you don't have to do that? And I was the only one of all my friends, of all the people I knew in the finance world, who, when they got their job offer, said no. Everybody else said yes. And we all hated the job the same amount, 100%. So what made me different? And when I was thinking about that, I realized it was getting to know who I was and building those foundations. And so that's how I started Sprout.
And you don't have to apologize for talking. That was incredible. And, it makes me want to hear more. And I'll just put a quick pause here because I think it was at this point that I was starting to get connected with you on social media. And I remember seeing the beginnings of Sprout, not sure what it was, thought, hey, that's cool. And, look at this guy, Will, and he's, on YouTube, he's putting out some content here. It looked interesting and exciting and valuable, but I didn't know what it was. And so in the beginning, did you know what Sprout would become, or was it simply just a vehicle to get away from that thing that you didn't want to do?
I had a vision and I still have a vision of what it will be. Problem was, like I said, I was in finance. I had never picked up a camera before, super introverted, just no hard skills in this world. I've never like I hadn't been on social media. I was still private on my personal profile, which I would treat that as a sign of like I didn't want anyone knowing what my life looked like unless you were my friend. And so I had to forego all of those ideologies and I had to get over those limiting beliefs to get started because the goal, like I said, is to build a movement, a mission that goes beyond me. But I knew if I was going to have an impact, I had to drop the ego and I had to start from somewhere. Now, to answer your question, I didn't know how to make content. I had no idea how to make content. So I just spent years figuring out what my format would be, what my style would be. The message was always in mind. Like, I don't think I lost myself in any other outside message, but I didn't know how to display it. And I didn't know what people would like and what I would like. Interviewing was the first method, or let's say content format, that really made sense to me. And actually, at the same time, also ended up doing well. But no, I remember when we first connected, like I had no idea what I was doing either. Like I was just testing things out.
So you start these interviews, you start figuring out content, you're taking action, which I think is important because it's one thing to just think about it. It's another thing to do it. And so you're doing it. At what point did you realize that there was something there with the interviews? Where did you start to recognize that there's traction here that you could capitalize on?
The first one, to be honest. I made videos for 2.5 years. I don't think any of them blew up. Just week in, week out, making videos. wondering when one would hit, if one would hit. And eventually, I mean, those videos were very different. I was running marathons without training. I was throwing events for 30 people by myself. I was traveling around the world making travel videos. I was doing these crazy challenges where I would, for example, I'd fly to a new country every day for 6 days. And I was doing it alone and filming that alone in front of people who would look at me in public. I mean, it's very draining to do that and to not be rewarded by it. If you do that and you're rewarded by it, at least you get some sort of momentum or confidence. You're like, well, it's a lot, but at least it pays the bills, it gets the community, this and that. But I wasn't getting any of that. There was no validation for what I was working on. And so I hit a point where I just said, okay, I'm going to take a break for the first time in 2.5 years and actually think about what I've just done for this amount of time. And does it feel good to me? And what can I do so I don't burn out? Because I know at some point I'm about to. Everyone that I know who made content at that time burned out. I was way past that, but I was on the track to just, blowing up. Like not with views, but as a person, just like burning out so much that I would blow up. And so I sat down. I didn't post any videos for like 2, 3 weeks. And in that time, I said, "What's a format that I haven't tried that I would really like to do?" And all my friends when I was younger told me I would be a motivational speaker one day. And I met a friend also who was doing interview content on the streets of New York. And I was like, this guy's getting a lot of views. He's asking questions that bring no value to the world. Like, I'm not interested in asking those questions, but this seems like a pretty not easy, but it's something I could be good at. This seems like something I could be good at and that wouldn't require me to exert myself so much that I would burn out. Like, I think I could actually enjoy doing this. So the first day I tried it, I went out with a friend to do interviews in Montreal, in Canada. And I was going to talk to people about money, about like how much money you make and questions like that. Do you like your job? Things like that. And my friend told me as I was about to do the first interview, it's like, listen, people have been doing that. Don't ask questions that have already been asked. What do you actually want to ask? And I'm like, yeah, that's okay. It's a good point. I would like to ask strangers of all ages how old they are and what it feels like to be their age. Because those are questions I had been looking up on Reddit for 3 years before that. I had been looking up every question that I asked in interviews and still to this day for 4 years before I started. So the first person I went up to, I did it. I asked those questions and I asked him, what's one piece of advice you would give to anybody, just anybody younger than you? It was like a minute and a half interview, maybe 2 minutes. And I mean, now they get a lot longer than that, but that was a short one. I went home after doing the rounds, doing a couple of interviews, posted the first one, which was the first interview. Like I didn't say, I think this guy is going to give me the best answer, so I'm going to make it. No, I just posted the first interview from the first person that I ever talked to. And like, I remember posting it. I go down to eat dinner with my parents. I get back upstairs and it's been like 45 minutes. I'm like, damn it, my TikTok has 10,000 views. And my dad's like, what? And I'm like, oh my God, something might be blowing up right now. Like something, like it might be happening. It's been like 2.5 years. This might be happening. And that video hit 1 million views within a day. And that was the first interview I ever posted, the first one I ever did. I think that interview has like 50 million views on all platforms. Like it's a really, really good one. But I just posted the first one I did. And that told me right away, like, damn, I really enjoyed doing that. And and that did really well. So that was kind of the beginning of it.
So I have to ask you, and I was going to ask this later on in our conversation, but I'll ask you now. How old are you, Will?
25. I just turned 25 a month ago.
And what does it feel like to be 25?
Oh, it feels amazing. I would say most 25-year-olds probably don't feel this way, but I feel great. I mean, I'm doing what I love. I have total freedom. I can do what I want, where I want, how I want, with who I want. Which I guess you can simplify that and say I have financial, time, location freedom, and I have a beautiful girlfriend, great family, great friends. I live in a great city, but I can be wherever I want, whenever I want. And yeah, I have a great team. Honestly, like I feel bad like explaining it because I love my life. I built this, I work really hard for it. But I love here and now right now. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So it feels really, really good to be 25.
Mm. So instead of asking right now for your advice to someone who's younger than you, because I want to hear that later on, you've interviewed so many people. I mean, do you even keep track of the number of interviews you've done?
Exactly no, but it's for sure been over 1,000 for sure.
And so, in those thousands of interviews, you've, I'm sure, learned a lot of things. And I think part of wisdom, and you can define wisdom in so many different ways, but I would imagine part of wisdom is learning from other people's experiences so that you don't need to make those same mistakes or do those same things. So, you've talked to so many people. What are maybe one or two or three big pieces of advice or chunks of interviews that stand out to you that you're like, I'll just never forget that. And I feel like I need to share those things more with the world?
And a great question. I love this because you're basically extracting like conclusions from data of people of all ages from all over the world. So an insight into what I've been doing here. Actually, the number one thing that comes up, and this is the thing that always comes up anytime someone asks me that question. When I ask the question, which is, what is one thing that when you were younger, you put a lot of importance on? And as you've gotten older, you realize wasn't actually that important. So we simplify that. We say, what's one thing that you worried about too much when you were younger? And I get this answer so much that I ask people for another answer now when they say it, because I'm like, there's got to be something else. But the answer to that is I cared too much about what other people thought of me. That's the answer that overwhelmingly the majority of people I speak to say. And I'm talking older people. So people 40 years old and up. And that, I've recently, because I get it so many times now, I want to learn a little bit more about why that might be. And so I asked them if you could go back in time and let's say remove that. Like if we could get rid of caring about what other people thought when you were 25. But I always use my age as a metric because I try to make it as try to get as personally invested as I can. How would that feel? And do you think that would have changed things about your life? And of course, the answer is always like, wow, I would have felt so different. I would have spent so much less time stressing and being anxious about things that I didn't need to be anxious about. And I've applied that. So I live my life I don't want to say carefree because I care a lot about my business, people around me, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't care about what other people think about me. I know. So if I can apply that at 25, imagine at 50 how I would feel in comparison to the person who has been holding on to all of those useless thoughts and worries. Honestly, they're useless. It really doesn't matter what people think about you. How will that person feel at 50 versus the one who lets go of it sooner than later? So that's been a really big one. I would leave it at that because I would say that's like by far the biggest one. I don't want to give another example to water down this one because I want people listening to really understand that if you can stop caring about what somebody thinks about you early or whatever, depending on how old you are right now, just now rather than later, you open up so many doors of opportunities. Because I think people care, like the attitude we have of what people around us might think about our actions, it impacts a lot. I can tell you a couple stories based on that if you'd like.
Yeah, let's hear
Okay.
one.
All right. So again, I do these interviews all over the world, right? And the attitudes people have are also dependent on their cultures. So when I was in South Korea, and I guess you can generalize it and say Asia in general, like Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. I've heard the similar things in the three countries. The general attitude people have towards those trying to follow their dreams, and let's assume that the dream is more entrepreneurial, obviously not corporate 9 to 5. Most people do not support those dreams. Like parents don't, friends don't, coworkers don't. And so the people I've interviewed in those countries specifically, they talk about how difficult it is. And they use the word it's impossible. They say it's impossible for me to follow my dreams. And it made me think a few things. I mean, the first thing is how lucky are we to be in North America where support, like following your dreams, is widely advertised. Like I was in New York, for example, and I see a huge billboard from Shopify, and Shopify, that the whole ad that they spent thousands of dollars to be in Times Square on a billboard, and they're pushing you to follow your dreams. Like, how crazy is it that there are companies that are supporting those dreams? We don't, I think we take it for granted, honestly. I mean, there's a general statement. I think in North America, we take a lot for granted. But the people who I spoke to in Asia, they don't have that same kind of environmental community support. And it just blows my mind that the people you surround yourself with can change a lot about how you think about yourself and the decisions you make. Like if I mean I surrounded myself with, let's say, 5 bankers when I was in university, and all I wanted to do was be a banker, even though I knew that I didn't actually want to. Like, it wasn't actually what I wanted from life. But because those people were close to me and their thoughts would be relayed to me quite often, I started believing that that was something I also would have enjoyed. Conversely, now the people I surround myself with the most are also entrepreneurs. And I never go back to a 9 to 5. I could never imagine myself working in that position, in that field, at that bank. I'm supported by those people to pursue the things I love because they also do that. So yeah, it was crazy to me because my friend and I would talk to these subscribers, these people that we met, and we'd be like, "Why don't you just start this? Why don't you just do that? Like, you have the tools, you have the personality, you have this, you have that." And they're like, "Oh my god, I've never heard anyone say this to me before." I'm like, "How crazy is that? If we put that aside, imagine what we could do."
Wow. That's so something that I don't think often about is how other cultures view the world, right? Just the perspectives that other people have simply because of where they were born and what they're surrounded by. And I think it's easy to take for granted the fact that you and I are, in North America. It's where we grew up. We've had these opportunities, these mindsets that are available to grab onto if we want them. Would you say that you have broadened your perspective through the work that you do, not only through traveling, but just simply through talking to more people?
For sure. I mean, I think if everyone could just speak to someone they don't know that looks different from them on a daily basis, I mean, it's not a hard thing. Like the barista, the janitor, I don't know, someone in an elevator. It's not difficult to start a conversation. It doesn't have to be complex, but you learn so much about yourself and about their world that it slowly starts to add on to you, right? Like you're collecting memories, you're collecting information from all these different people, and that makes you feel differently about the world. Yeah, I'm extremely different than how I was when I started these interviews, and I have this craving to learn more. Like it's fascinating to know what certain cultures think and feel about certain topics, even the same topics. I can pick the same topic. Like I can say, "What's your what do you think money makes people happy?" I don't know. I can just pick that as an example. I could go around the world and ask that question, and the answer will be tremendously different. And then I could write a book about it. I could talk about it forever. And like, you could do anything. I mean, whatever, we don't have to go that. Just asking one question to different people sparks a lot of interest. And I think when you become curious or when you practice being curious, you become very curious. It's hard not to be curious once you've gone started on that journey.
So I think you almost answered the next question that I was going to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. If somebody listening to this episode struggles to initiate conversation with other people, maybe they've just never been good at it and that's the narrative they have in their mind, or they care too much about what other people think, whatever it is, what's one piece of advice or guidance you would have to help somebody who wants to start more conversations and have more engaging conversations?
Yeah, I would say I didn't answer the question, so that's perfect. It's a great question. I think this is often overlooked. I'm going to give myself credibility here because I've just realized recently that this exists. I believe, I believe that I have the most viewed video on the internet about talking to strangers. I
Wow.
believe, okay, because if you look up how to talk to strangers and you click on videos on Google, I'm the first one that shows up. Correct? You can correct me if I'm wrong for this,
We're gonna we're
because
gonna we're
maybe it's
gonna
just my search engine.
test this real quick. I misspelt strangers the first time, so give me a sec here. If I go to videos, you are, yeah, that is you.
Am I?
Wow.
Okay, I don't know if we're just saying that because he doesn't want me to feel bad, but
No, it is. So it's the video of you talk to strangers, period. It will change your life. And it has how many views does it have here? I can't see it. It has a hundred eleven
two,
thousand likes.
yeah, like 2.6 million, I think, views.
Yeah.
So obviously I've spoken to lots of people in my life, and this is coming also from someone who is very, very introverted, like so introverted that my teacher in high school gave me a book called Quiet by Susan Cain about how introverts can use their power to make change in the world. I'm not really sure. I never read it. I was honestly insulted by it, but she was doing the right thing, so not her fault. But yeah, my lesson on how to navigate those conversations is to have an intention in mind when you start a conversation. So I think people right now are very on edge. Everyone is like, they think you're going to do something to them when you walk up to them. I don't understand it. I don't get why society is like this, but everyone feels like you're going to sell them something. Like I walk up to people still to interview them and I get responses. People are like, no, I'm not buying what you're selling. I'm like, I don't have anything on me. I'm literally walking up to you. I have no products on me. What can I be selling? So anyway, just I got a little rant because I have a recent one. But everyone is on edge right now. So how do you initiate a conversation with someone that you don't know? You need to come in with an intention. So when I walk up to somebody to ask them if I can speak to them, I will say, "Excuse me, sorry to bother you. We're filming a video where we ask strangers of all ages what it feels like to be their age. Is there any chance you have a couple minutes and you can answer a few questions?" That's what I say. Like I say hi, they say hi, I say what I just said, and immediately their guard goes down because they're like, okay, he's not going to rob me. He's not going to steal from me. He's not going to hurt me. He's not going to sell me something. He's not going to prank me. They're like, cool. He said it in a respectful way. He's dressed well, like he's well shaved. He has a nice haircut, wearing clean clothes. This looks like a person that is not going to hurt me, and I like what they're talking about. So then immediately their guard goes down. Now you don't need a camera, you don't need a video to start a conversation, but the point is you need to have your intention in mind. Even if you're walking up to like a pretty girl or pretty guy or a handsome guy and you want to get their number, come in with that. Hi, how's it going? I thought you were really pretty, blah, blah, blah. Where are you from? Blah, blah, this and that. You come in with that, you come in with something with an intention and immediately people's guards are let down. So I would say that practice your intention and dress rather clean, don't look weird with how you're dressed. Like I was going to do, I haven't done it yet, but I'd love to do a social experiment of looking a little dirtier and also maybe putting a suit on and to see how many people would respond to me with the suit versus not. But obviously, how you look makes a huge difference. But yeah, to sum it up, I would really say having an intention in mind and labeling that intention at the beginning of the conversation, that changes everything.
Yeah. And what I'm also hearing is that being clear and concise and delivering it in a respectful, easy to understand manner is also important, which makes sense. So, from there, my other question for you is going to be a twist on a question that I ask everybody. So, the question I ask everybody is, what does the word endure or endurance mean to you? Now, instead of asking you that question, I want to hear about the hardest interview that you've ever had to work to get. And so there's got to be one person, maybe they're a well-known person, maybe not, but it was the hardest interview for you to get to. And I do have a person in mind that seems like almost untouchable, unreachable. I have no idea how you did it. So we'll see if you say this person, but from that interview, if you had a backtrack, right, all the way to back when you started Sprought, how did you get to that point? What were all the dots that needed to connect to get to that point? And I asked that because to me, that required some sort of endurance or persistence.
You want to say it?
Dalai Lama?
Yeah. That's who I was thinking about also. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a chance to interview Dalai Lama for a brief period of time. And yeah, the Dalai Lama, that was really crazy. That was in when was it? Where are we? May right now? That was last month.
Yeah.
So I interviewed the Dalai Lama at his home in Dharamshala in India, northern India, right near Nepal. That's where most of the Buddhist monks are out there. The Tibetan Buddhist monks live. It's been, I think, 50, 60 years since they all relocated from Tibet. How did I pull that off? I mean, yeah, I still ask myself that question sometimes too. But basically, if you want the logistic answer, so I started out by asking my audience. I try to be as resourceful as possible. I think it's very easy if you ask people questions to get answers. A lot of people don't ask. So like first life lesson is just ask all the time, ask everybody everything because everyone knows something that you don't. So I asked my audience, hey, I want to interview the Dalai Lama. How do I do this? Does anyone have any insight? Do you know him? I'm not sure because my audience is very diverse. They come from 100 plus countries. I figured maybe there's a monk who follows me who might be able to help me out. I didn't have anybody who could really help me out, but I did have people telling me that it was going to be very hard to do. I was like, that's not very helpful, but okay, thank you. And most of them are like, you have to go to his office in Dharamshala, northern India, and you have to try to make an appointment. Or you can email him. Actually, that's step number two. So one person told me if you're ever in New York, go to this Tibetan store, and there's a guy who works there, and he's my friend, and talk to him and ask him. I'm like, okay. So I happened to be in New York, actually the day before I left India, and I go to this store and I talk to the guy, and I'm like, is there any chance I can interview the Dalai Lama? And if so, how? And he's like, I have no idea, but you could try to email them, you can email the secretary and see if there can be something that they can arrange. I'm like, okay, how do I email the secretary? Like, doesn't seem like a widely available contact. But he told me it's somewhere online. So I was digging, trying to figure out the secretary's email. Eventually I found it, got into contact with the secretary, and he wasn't very responsive, but he told me it's possible that something can happen, but you have to come to the you have to come to the office and talk about it. And I'm like, okay, so I have to fly to this small town in northern India to go to his office in his monastery to potentially interview this guy. And I went with two friends. We devoted 5 days to seeing if it could happen. We actually interviewed a lot of monks, and that video is coming out soon, which is going to be really cool. And we interviewed the official translator of the Dalai Lama. We've interviewed like a lot of really interesting people in his circle. And eventually, through finding the secretary in the office, he agreed to put us in a line with other people who are basically getting blessings. So the Dalai Lama doesn't take any one-on-one meetings anymore. Like if you work for the US embassy, this is what he told me. So I don't know how true it is, but he said if you work for the US embassy, you have to do exactly what I'm telling you also. So after COVID, the Dalai Lama stopped taking personal interviews. He's also 89 years old, but it makes sense. And he's like, okay, you can come in this blessing line. And what I'll do is I'll come and I'll give you a few minutes so you can talk to him. And we'll take photos of it. So I'm like, he's like, that's the best I can do. Like, I cannot get you anything more than that, but I can get you the chance to actually ask him a few questions. So when we went to the blessing line really early in the morning on our last day there, surely enough, he was there and he kind of held the line a little bit. There's like hundreds of people in this room. He held the line for a bit and he let me talk to the Dalai Lama and ask him a few questions. And yeah, I asked him, I mean, you're in the presence of the whole, like basically the Dalai Lama is the living version of God for Buddhists. So if I'm abiding by their religion, I'm talking to their God, so I'm here talking to God, talking to the Buddhist God. And I'm like, can't really ask him too many questions. He also doesn't speak English. He gets it translated from somebody else. And so I'm in there, like holding his hands, holding my hands. I'm looking at him. I'm like, what's your best advice for young people today? I'm like, I gotta ask him that, gotta go with the classic. And and all monks said this, by the way, but he really nailed it. You have to lead your life with a kind and open heart. And he just kind of stares at me because most people are there and they're like, oh my God, it's the Dalai Lama. Like, I love you. And I'm there like, very chill, kind of like, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Put my hands in his hands. I'm like, what's your best advice for a young person today? And I'm there like smiling at him. He's probably looking at me like, this is a weird guy or he's smiling at me. But he looks at me, he holds my hand and he held them for a couple seconds. And there's a lot of people around us, like it's living God. So I'm there, and he's really holding my hands and looking at me in the eyes, like dead in the eyes. And I'm like, am I supposed to leave? Like I'm looking around, like, is it time to go? But he's not doing anything. And then he kind of like pulls my hand again, and he goes, and when you get older, stop trying to be so cunning. And he looks at me and bursts into laughter. And I'm like, and everyone around me bursts into laughter. I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And then like we
Mm.
touch heads, he blesses me, and then I leave. And yeah, after that, like, even my hands are shaking just thinking about it because that was really stressful. That was really crazy. And to go on your second question, when I emailed the secretary, he gets thousands of emails, right, to meet the Dalai Lama. And I had interviewed another one of the more well-known spiritual leaders in the world, Guru Dev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. He has a meditation retreat center in Bangalore, in India. And I know that they're sort of connected, like not the same religion, but I know if the media team of one is for sure heard of the media team of the other. So in the email I sent, I told them, hey, I've interviewed your friend, Guru Dev, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. I'm like, I don't know if they're friends, but I'm gonna name drop because how the hell are they gonna recognize me if I don't name drop? And the fact that I name dropped really helped because they kept talking about it when I was at the office. They're like, oh, and he's also interviewed this guy on this and that. And in order to get that interview with Guru Dev, a lot of other things have to happen. So, question of endurance, I think I can summarize it well. I don't know if anyone listening or if you, Joe, know the Lucas brothers. They, believe they're well known for producing movies or directing movies nowadays, but they used to do stand up comedy. And I interviewed them at a comedy festival. And comedians are very interesting to interview because there's so many people want to be a comedian, but they fail. So I asked the successful ones, what's the difference between successful comedians and unsuccessful comedians? And those guys in specific, I think they gave me the best answer. They said, we're pretty much the same person, but the people who are standing before you who are successful never gave up. The only difference between somebody who is successful and somebody who isn't is that the successful person didn't stop trying. And I think if you want to talk about endurance and enduring, it all comes down to that. The only difference between the people who don't achieve their dreams and those who do is that the ones who achieve their dreams didn't stop. I would not say that I'm particularly skilled or that I had like all the gifts and the tools to figure this journey out to the point that I have so far. But I never stopped. All my other friends gave up. All my other friends, when they heard no, they let that happen. They took the no and they stopped trying. I never stopped trying. So I would say, like, that's a very brief sum. Like, you could round it up and be like, if you don't stop trying, eventually you could interview the Dalai Lama, which is my goal in life, was not to interview the Dalai Lama, but the opportunity to do it and the confidence to do it and the discipline or the willingness to go all out and try to make it happen. It came from that initial decision not to give up.
As it goes, a river cuts through rock, not because of its power, but because of its persistence. And that's been you to this point. And it's been such an honor to hear parts of your story and to see this all unfold. And as we wrap up our time together, Will, I have one final question that I ask everybody. And you've given out already so many great nuggets of wisdom and pieces that people can walk away from this podcast with. But there are people listening to this who don't feel like they're in a position to go after what they want, not because the world told them they couldn't or because they don't have the confidence, but simply because they're just in a dark place, right? They feel like they've been buried and they're not sure where to go or what to do or how to get out of it. If you were to speak to somebody in that position, going through a tough time, struggling, maybe feeling like they're just keeping their head above water, what would you say to those people? Yeah, and I'll leave it there.
The first thing that comes to my mind is an interview I did with one of my friends' grandparents, and she's in her 80s. She was telling me about this time where she was, I think, 47 or 48, and she wanted to go back to school and get her PhD because that was a goal that she had always wanted. But I think she had children, life got in the way. She never ended up pursuing it. So she wanted to achieve this dream, and she asked all of her friends, or she told all of her friends, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to get my PhD. And her friends all told her, why would you do that? Like, you're nearly 50. Why would you even bother? And she looked at them and she said, well, I'm going to be 50 whether I do this or not. So I may as well get the PhD. And it's hard to speak when you think things are not going well for you. But the truth is, and maybe this is naive because maybe I've been doing so well for so long that I don't relate anymore. But to me, and I believe this because this is what happened when I was going through my own hard times, I understood that you always have the capacity to have one of two thoughts. With everything that happens to you in life, you can either have a negative thought or a negative reaction to it, or you can think about it positively. So I can always take something that happens to me and I can learn from it. I always have that opportunity to learn from it and speak positively to myself and positively about my ability to move forward. Or conversely, and it's the level of difficulty to do one or the other is the same. But conversely, I can also be hard on myself for it. So for people who are going through a hard time, I would say the answer is try speaking to yourself differently. For all the times that you are saying negative things about your inability to do something, or, it can't be me, it's not me, I'm not this, I'm not that. For all the excuses you give for others and the lack of excuses you give to yourself, why don't you try actually flipping that and talking very nicely and very optimistically about your own abilities? I think my biggest strength and what I tell everybody when you said it earlier, Joe, of like, what advice would you give to your younger self or something? I would say this works in this circumstance too. If you can believe in yourself, then most of the work is already done. So all you have to do, and actually to believe in yourself, all that it takes is speaking to yourself in a more positive manner. If you're going through a hard time, don't think about the circumstance. Think about yourself. How do you speak to yourself? And how can you change that and manipulate those words, tweak them a little bit so that the outcome is more positive? And I think that builds a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence, and sooner or later you end up exactly where you want to be.
So beautiful, so good. And I appreciate it so much, Will. And we already referenced your social media, but just again, if people want to see some of the content you're putting out or follow along with what you're doing, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, for sure. So on all social media, we go by Sprought, Sprouht. Right now we just recently launched this an online education platform. So for anybody who's working at a shitty job, like if you heard my story and you feel similarly, a shitty job, you want to build a life of freedom, we launched an online education platform to give people the tools and the community to make that change, make that transformation. It's called Sprought University, and you can find it on our platforms as well. I would say that's probably the most transformational thing that we can offer, as well as the videos themselves too.
Yeah. And this conversation is going to be so impactful for so many. And Will, I can't wait to watch what you do next. And thank you again so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.